He was the mighty skin changer of Middle-earth, able to transform into a great bear. Not only would his home be a safe haven in the Vales of Anduin, but his descendants and followers would carry on his name into the Fourth Age. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the life of Beorn, his descendants, and all who call themselves Beornings. While Beorn makes a great impact on the story of The Hobbit, he and his kind are also very mysterious. We don't know for certain their origins or how they came to possess their skin-changing ability. Gandalf says that he believes Beorn and his people originally came from the Misty Mountains. However, Gandalf also says they were driven from their homes by the orcs of the Misty Mountains. Just as we don't know when Beorn was driven away by the orcs, we don't know the skin changer's age. Tolkien himself confirmed in one of his letters that Beorn was indeed a mortal man. Though a skin changer, and no doubt a bit of a magician, Beorn was a man. What we do know is that by the later Third Age, Beorn is living alone at his home near Mirkwood. Near his home was the Carrick, a tall stony island in the Anduin River. Beorn himself builds stairs reaching to the pinnacle of the Great Stone. At times, he would be seen climbing to the top in his bare form, gazing at the moon, or toward his former home of the Misty Mountains. Gandalf would witness Beorn doing just this, hearing him growl in the tongue of the bears, "The day will come when they will perish, and I shall go back." As for Beorn's size and appearance, he is described as a great tall man with black hair. While we don't have an exact figure for how tall he was, we know that Bilbo could have passed under the man's legs without ducking and would not have skimmed the hem of his knee-length tunic. While some have theorized that this would put the skin changer at 11 or 12 feet tall, we must keep in mind that this very well could be an exaggerated statement by the narrator, in order to convey how enormous Beorn felt to Bilbo. Either way, he was certainly a mountain of a man, and even more formidable in his bear form. It is after being set upon the Carrick by the great eagles that Thorin and company make their way to Beorn's Hall in 2941. Gandalf and Bilbo are the first to approach the skin changer, and Gandalf tells the tale of their journey. The dwarves come at intervals in pairs, briefly interrupting Gandalf's story, which Beorn finds more and more interesting. Wishing to hear the entirety of their tale, Beorn shakes off the arrival of more dwarves rather than turning them away. Gandalf's approach is both successful and wise, for it is known that Beorn was not fond of dwarves. We don't know for certain why Beorn dislikes the dwarves. Perhaps it's partially due to the dwarves' obsession with silver, gold, and jewels. We are told in The Hobbit that Beorn had none of these things in his home. In fact, with the exception of a few knives, there was no metal at all. Beorn leaves and confirms Gandalf's story to be true, leading him to agree to aid Thorin's company. In Beorn's hall, there were ponies, dogs, and sheep, who served the company a great meal. Beorn was able to communicate with them in some animal-like language as they catered to their guests. No doubt, in part due to his relationship with animals, Beorn does not eat meat. His diet instead consists mainly of honey and cream. Beorn provides Bilbo and the dwarves with ponies, and a horse for Gandalf, as they make their way to Mirkwood. He gives them food, water skins, bows and arrows, and grim advice, that they will likely not find anything wholesome to eat or drink within the dark forest, that there is a black stream they should neither drink from nor bathe in, for it carries an enchantment of drowsiness, and that they should not stray from the path for any reason. Though he was naturally distrustful of travelers, convinced of their goodwill, he says his home is open to them should they ever return through his lands. Before any could take him up on this offer, Beorn would instead come to them. As word spreads throughout Mirkwood of the death of Smaug, Beorn receives word in his very house. The orcs of the Misty Mountains, already riled by the death of the Great Goblin, would march upon Erebor in the Battle of Five Armies. Beorn himself would arrive near the very end of the conflict. In that last hour, Beorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or from where. He came alone and in bear's shape, and he seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns, and he tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. He fell upon their rear and broke like a clap of thunder through the ring. The dwarves were making a stand, still about their lords upon a low rounded hill. Then Beorn stooped and lifted Thorin, who had fallen pierced with spears, and bore him out of the fray. Swiftly he returned, and his wrath was redoubled, so that nothing could withstand him, and no weapon seemed to bite upon him. He scattered the bodyguard, and pulled down Bolg himself, and crushed him. Then dismay fell on the goblins, and they fled in all directions. In this passage, we get a hint that Beorn's bear size may indeed change based on his mood. Described here as having grown to almost giant size in his wrath, he would surely have been an incredible force as he kills the leader of the orcs and scatters their armies. With Erebor reclaimed, the orcs defeated, and Thorin laid to rest within the mountain, Beorn, Bilbo, Gandalf, and Thranduil make their way westward. Thranduil returns to his halls, as Gandalf and Bilbo return for a time to the Hall of Beorn. They would stay at Beorn's for the midwinter festival known as Yule. We are told Yuletide was warm and merry at Beorn's house, and men came from far and wide to feast at Beorn's bidding. The goblins of the Misty Mountains were now few and terrified, and the wargs had vanished from the woods, so that men went abroad without fear. We are told in the days to come, Beorn would become a great chief among the Northmen who gathered around him, ruling a wide region between the mountains and the wood. These men would come to be known as the Beornings, a term that certainly refers to Beorn's descendants, but could also be referring to the Northmen who simply took him as their leader as well. We are told by Glóin in the Fellowship of the Ring that the only reason passage from Erebor to Rivendell was still possible was thanks to the Beornings. Though they did charge high tolls and were still not overly fond of dwarves, they were reliable and kept their land safe from the orcs and wargs. It is said that many generations of Beorn's line maintained the power of taking bear form. Some became grim men and bad, but most were in heart like Beorn, though none would ever equal his size and strength. By 3019 of the Third Age, we know that the lordship of the Beornings had passed to Beorn's son, Grimbeorn. His name is a combination of his father's, meaning bear, and Grim, meaning fierce. Under the leadership of Grimbeorn, their lands in the Vales of Anduin would remain safe, as no orc nor wolf would dare to enter the land of the Beornings. Another thing we know of the Beornings is that they were great bakers, and are famous for their honey cakes. It is said that like Limbus, these honey cakes could nourish travelers greatly, and like the elves, the Beornings were hesitant to share them with others. As for further actions or conflicts during the War of the Ring, we are left with precious few clues. One is that when Frodo wears the One Ring at Amon Hen, the Hill of Sight, he sees among other things the land of the Beornings on fire. While this could very well mean that Sauron's northern forces had indeed made war upon the Beornings, we have no record or tale of this conflict. What we do know is that the Beornings would survive into the Fourth Age. After the war, when Celeborn, Galadriel, and the elves of Lorien had destroyed Dol Guldur, Celeborn and Thranduil would divide the forest of Mirkwood, newly named Erin Lasgallen, Wood of Green Leaves. In this arrangement, the northern realm would be under the lordship of Thranduil, the southern would belong to the elves of Lorien, and the central region is given to the Beornings. With Middle-earth freed from Sauron's influence, the elves and Beornings would no doubt help the forest to return to its more natural form, back when it was known as Greenwood the Great. As for Beorn, we can assume that he died sometime before the War of the Ring. We are never told whether he would indeed return one day to his former home of the Misty Mountains, or if instead he would have found peace in his new home, surrounded by his descendants and all who call themselves Beornings. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Jim Limber Davis, Listen Me the Cinda, Mandu Pandu, Andrew Carlisle, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Salim Rahman, Zetrock, Berto Berg, Grand Strategy Nerd, Graham Darricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.